There is no superior jurisprudence which can ever say to a nation, you shall not, or you shall no longer be the masters of your own fate. I doubt indeed whether any nation can ever be brought to renounce its own self-mastery except it was deceived, except by means of trickery and cheating. Certainly it was by deception that Britain was hijacked into the European Community in 1972. It was by deception that it was induced to give retrospective assent to the hijacking at the referendum in 1975. And it is by deception that the hijackers are now engaged in obtaining a further stage of Britain's amalgamation into the new West European state by a new and far-reaching transfer of authority. Parliament is shortly going to be invited to authorize the direct representation of the electorate of the United Kingdom in a parliament of the EEC. The government claimed to have discovered that we are morally and legally bound to do this in accordance with the Treaty of Rome, to which we acceded by the Treaty of Brussels in 1972. Now, it's a most extraordinary thing and highly convenient for the hijackers that this discovery remained unmade, or at any rate unannounced, not merely until after the exhaustive debates in 1972, when the European Communities Bill was forced through the House of Commons by means of the guillotine and the grace of a handful of Liberal MPs, but until after the referendum in 1975. Was it not extraordinary that no one should have happened to mention to those who might have been considering voting yes, that thereby, incidentally, they were approving the principle of a directly elected European Parliament? It was indeed. But what is more remarkable is that the government were at pains to declare that the question of direct elections was outside the referendum altogether. It almost defies belief that direct elections to the European Assembly were not mentioned at all in the document which the government addressed to the electorate at the referendum. Many of us, of course, did at that time warn the electorate that a yes vote meant commitment to a European Parliament, which would supersede and override our own. But if we had dared to say that in the event of a yes vote, such a thing would be agreed to within a year, we should not merely have been pooh-poohed as alarmists with extravagant imaginations. We should have been accused of downright lying. Had not the government itself, in the White Paper, report on renegotiation, made it clear that the issue of direct elections did not arise and was not involved in the referendum? Here's the passage. It was made absolutely clear by the United Kingdom that Her Majesty's government could not take up a position on the proposal for direct elections to the European Assembly by universal suffrage before the process of renegotiation had been completed and the results of renegotiation submitted to the British people. How could the government say in March 1975 that they could not yet take up a position on direct elections, and then claim after June, 3 months later, that direct elections had always been implicit in the treaty and that everybody should have known it all along? It was a piece of electoral deception worthy to put alongside the Conservative parties. Our commitment is to negotiate no less, no more at the 1970 election. What it turns out the government were really doing was to tell their European colleagues that until after the referendum they didn't intend to reveal to the British people that those who voted yes were voting for a directly elected European Parliament, because that would have blown to the winds the claim of some pro-marketeers that no real diminution of national independence and self-government was involved. Of course it was. Of course it is. Does anyone seriously imagine that the Parliament of this country will for long be allowed to debate matters which have already been debated and approved in a directly elected Parliament of the EEC? Our own national Parliament at Westminster will soon be told to mind its own little local difficulties and not meddle in the affairs of a community, which are the business of those directly elected by the same electors for that very purpose. It is true that at present the formal powers of the European Assembly are limited, though they do include the power of almost nuclear dimensions to dismiss the European Commission itself or to reject the community's entire draft budget. What is true, however, is that those powers can at any time be extended by amendment of the treaty, and that under Section 1 of the Act of 1972, that would require no more than a single vote of the House of Commons, taken after a debate which need last no more than 90 minutes. It is true that Parliament, and through Parliament the electorate, have still the power to refuse to accept direct elections. But the same soft soap is being used again as in 1972 and 1975. On the one hand, we shall be assured that it's only direct elections to the present Assembly, with its present limited powers which are at issue. There are no proposals for increasing those powers, so why worry? The argument will run. It won't be for a long time ahead, if ever, that the directly elected Assembly becomes a real Parliament with real powers, and that will only happen in the fullness of time if we agree to it of our own free will. On the other hand, we shall be told that it would be bad faith to reject an undertaking to the other member states into which the government have entered, and that in any case direct elections were always envisaged by the Rome Treaty to which we have acceded. This is false, and I will prove it to be so, and I will prove that the government themselves know it to be so. Once again, the British nation is to be induced by trickery to sign away its birthright. Let me read to you the words in the Treaty of Rome, which, so the government claimed to be convinced, create an obligation upon member states to set up a directly elected European Parliament. The article which lays down the procedure begins as follows: The Assembly shall draw up proposals for elections by direct universal suffrage in accordance with a uniform procedure in all member states. Now, this has nothing whatsoever to do with what the government are proposing to stampede Parliament and the country into accepting. The attempt to cite the Treaty of Rome as committing this country to what the government propose is a barefaced piece of deception. The treaty does not refer to any old proposals for direct elections. It refers to elections by direct universal suffrage in accordance with a uniform procedure in all member states. Any proposals which do not provide for a uniform procedure in all member states do not comply with the treaty, and the attempt to use the treaty to commend or enforce them is not even a withered fig leaf to cover the nakedness of usurpation. Be under no misapprehension that that is what is involved in the issue of direct elections, and that it is fully intended by those who will strain every nerve to bring direct elections about. There cannot be coordinate authority between two sets of persons representing the same electorate. What the one gains, the other must lose, and the gain will be to the body which has the larger claim.